Hürmetli hanımlar ve mırzalar.
Уважаемые
Telefonlarınızda
dear ladies and gentlemen,
Aldın ala
welcome
rahmet.
to today's conference. Please switch off your mobile phones.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, for our convenient work during the conference, please turn on the silent mode on your mobile phones. We appreciate your understanding. Today we'll start from the plenary sessions of the second day. Бүгінгі күннің пленарлық отырысын ашық деп жариялаймыз.
Today's plenary session is open. Welcome.
Надо, чтобы эти знания он умел использовать, чтобы он мог эти знания в своей жизни сделать, чтобы он сам стал счастливым и создал условия, чтобы другие стали счастливыми.
Konferansiyamızın birinci natice gününün
Welcome
qorытындысын ұсыну
to the
үшін
conference.
Дербес білім беру ұйымының
Now you just saw
қамқоршылық
the
кеңесінің
results
мүшесі,
of the first
Кембридж
day of the
университетінің
conference.
құрметті
And now I would
профессоры
like to
Колин
give the floor
Маклафлин шақырылады.
to Colin McLaughlin, the professor from the Cambridge University. He's from Nazarbayev Intellectual School, the UK.
Good morning. Доброе утро, Kyla Tan. It's very good to be here this morning. Very good. This way. So my job is to very quickly raise some thoughts and observations on key ideas, key things from yesterday. And I want to begin by recognizing some of the thanks that are owed by us and some of the celebrations. First, the remarkable achievement of the accreditation of the selection process. That's very, very important in terms of how NIS and its work is regarded. So congratulations, and thanks to David Marsh in that process. The village school projects, I think, are, from my experience in Kazakhstan, absolutely central to the next step of the development of education. And as we heard, the village school projects are the majority of schools. So this is a very important project. I want to acknowledge personally the role of the Akim in supporting this conference, and obviously in some of the work that is being done and presented in this conference. So thanks to those people. So let me then just pick up on some of the important things. And this is my view. I didn't attend everything, but these were some of the very important thought-provoking ideas that came to me during the day. So first, and I think this is crucial, we began with recognizing where we are as a human race and as separate nations, and the importance of what Kuliash called humanitarian education. I personally think this is something we must not take our eye off. We have considerable challenges in our environments and worlds at the moment, and so the need to make education human, this was repeated when there were discussions about AI as well, to keep it human. Learning is human. Learning is not a technical process, it is a human process. And we heard, and I was catapulted back to the 1970s actually, when I began teaching. There was a book called, in England, called Home and School. It was a seminal text, and it told us about the importance of equity and about the challenges we faced in regard to income, equity, and outcomes. And here we are again in this year, in this next century, facing those same issues. Globally, our societies have become more unequal. And so this is a central challenge for us. And we were reminded very forcefully yesterday by statistics about why that matters, about the impact of income on children and their educational outcomes. The other sentence, which I've written here in capital letters because I think it's a very important one, was also one we heard yesterday in discussions about early years, which is everything comes down to interaction. Interaction matters and shapes our young people's development early on and later. And this is something we need to remember. It goes with the humanness of education. Children learn not just from programs, special programs, but from every interaction they have, from every message they receive about where they stand, how they're doing, what their mark is. And that was followed up for me by a fascinating session on interaction with the environment, the physical environment in schools. And there was a fascinating session on architecture and its relationship to learning and to young people's development and emotional state when they're learning. This conference is called Research into Practice. It's something that I think is a very important title, and it's a very important concept. So I spent some time looking at some of the teachers who were researching, hearing those reports, and looking at other research that I could find quickly in the conference. And it seemed to me to raise some very important questions. When we're thinking about research, what do we think about who does the research? There is resistance in some areas to the idea that teachers should do research. Teacher research is not the same as academic or university-based research. These are very different researches, and it feels like that debate still has to continue. What do we research? Is it seen as rather simplistic to research practice? What do we do with our research? Does it go into practice? And how do we research? I have to say, I saw some fascination with numbers, as though somehow numbers, when reporting research, were more significant than words. And that's one question I want to leave you with. There was here in this room a fascinating discussion, and even some disagreement, about personalized learning. And I was fascinated by this debate because it seemed to me that we have somehow confused standards and standardization. But we have become so standardized in our systems and in our approach to learning that we now have a problem, the problem of standardization. And so that uniformity, I think, is making us try to get away from it, trying to find our way back to the human modes of learning and to the interactions between people in classrooms that lead to learning. So I think maybe I ended up thinking that personalized learning was an answer to the problem of uniformity. And maybe we needed to return back to Vygotsky. So I will end there. Thank you very much.
Осындай қызықты күннің қорытындысымен бөліскенің үшін
Thank you very much for such a brief overview of yesterday's work. Next, we give the floor to the moderator. Dear colleagues, dear participants, I'm sure that the second day of the conference will be quite productive as well. I am the moderator, I'm Aygul Kazjanova.
Of every child. Professionalism is measured by the best and highest standards when teachers use excellence as a critical creation for judging their actions and attitudes. Their professionalism is enhanced. Three primary indicators constitute the meaning of professionalism: responsibility, respect, and risk-taking. When teachers are committed to these three values, their behaviors will reveal greater professionalism. Today, we have Dr. Arnold Brouwer, Director of the Dutch Research Center for Examination and Certification. He is a researcher, innovator, and consultant of methods and techniques for analyzing, optimizing, and auditing reliable and valid assessments. And the topic he will present today will be competency-based education and teachers' learning agility profile. The floor is yours, Dr. Brouwer.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor to have the opportunity to speak to you at this perfectly organized conference. Yesterday, I have already been blessed with your hospitality and kindness during my workshop, and it's a special experience for myself to be part of this conference with so many inspired teachers, so thank you sincerely for that. In the next 15 minutes, I would like to bring you into my presentation entitled Competency-Based Education and Teachers Learning Agility Profile. Next slide. Yeah. I can skip this one, I think, because I was introduced already in a very nice way. So let's start with the subject matter of my presentation. In today's modern world, knowledge is increasingly freely available. Your students also know this and are increasingly able to find their knowledge mostly online. Summaries of textbooks can be downloaded, and for writing engagements, for example, students can cut and paste increasingly easily, converting existing text into synonyms, making them look like original texts. At the same time, knowledge is multiplying at a lightning pace, and with it, existing knowledge is also becoming obsolete earlier and earlier. What was new and original yesterday is today already outdated and replaced by the latest insights. As a result, the classical process of gathering and remembering knowledge as an educational goal has therefore become less relevant these days. Today's education system increasingly demands the development of the so-called 21st century skills. This movement is also known as the shift from knowledge-based learning to competency-based education. Competency-based means that the student is able to apply existing and freely available knowledge at a higher level of thinking. As an example, the knowledge-based learning, the student is educated to recite the names of all continents on the world globe, whereas in competency-based education, he or she will be learned to identify all continents by name and position when given a world globe. In other words, competency-based learning appeals to so-called higher order thinking skills, or HOTS. This is a concept of education reform based on learning taxonomies as described, for example, in Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a model or pyramid for defining thinking skills that distinguishes between 6 levels of educational learning objectives. These can be ordered in 3 levels of lower order thinking skills and 3 levels of higher order thinking skills. The lower order thinking skills are remember, defined as the ability to recall facts, terms, and basic answers. Understand, described as the skill to organize, compare, and interpret information, and apply, known as the characteristic to solve problems by applying knowledge and techniques. The higher order thinking skills are analyze, described as the ability to find patterns, see connections, and draw conclusions. Evaluate, defined as the skill to make judgments about information based on a set of criteria. And create, known as the quality to combine elements into a pattern or idea that had not existed before. Remember, however, that although the focus these days is on more and more on the higher order thinking skills, the student still must first master the lower order thinking skills to be able to acquire the upper 3 levels of Bloom's pyramid. In other words, in our education, we need to focus on all of the 6 levels. Besides the step-by-step learning curve expected of the student, there is remarkably little attention in research on competency-based learning theory on how the teachers themselves learn and develop. From feedback theory and from the field of the social psychological research, however, we know that every person is naturally inclined to unconsciously project their own perspective or way of learning and developing onto that of the other. In other words, we often unwittingly assume that the other learns exactly the same way like we learn ourselves. And that assumption may cause issues in our communication and attuning with others. Self-understanding of how the teacher learns himself or herself is therefore crucial for the teacher to be able to make the right connection with the individual student in developing his or her higher order thinking skills, and to be able to switch between different learning styles. After all, each student has his or her own natural style of learning as well. It is assumed that learning agility theory provides an evidence-based and practically useful model for aligning teacher and student in their both ways of learning and developing higher order thinking skills. Learning agility has its origins in personality theory and organizational psychology. It focuses more on the emotional intelligence of the instead of the cognitive intelligence of the teacher. Recently, this theory has been applied experimentally to the modern field of education. As an example, Dr. Drew Howard from the College of Graduate Studies of Tarleton State University wrote his doctoral thesis on the subject Learning Agility in Education, an analysis of pre-service teachers' learning agility and teaching performance. Now allow me to shortly introduce you to the theory of learning agility. Learning agility is defined as the ability to quickly develop and apply new and effective behavior under changing circumstances. One could also say it is the willingness to learn from experiences and apply those learnings to new situations. It is the core capability to develop effective behaviors and keep pace with ever-changing situations. Speed and flexibility are two important components of learning agility. Speed enables the teacher to take quick action, and flexibility helps the teacher to be open to new concepts. To make good sense of the learning agility concept, it is important to emphasize that learning agility is not the same as learning ability. Agility starts where ability ends. Learning ability is more cognitive or IQ based, whereas learning agility is behavioral and relates to your emotional intelligence. Learning ability may be inborn, but learning agility can be developed and improved. So, what makes up the learning agility concept? A group of researchers of Korn Ferry in the year of 2010 have stated 5 factors of learning agility: mental agility, people agility, change agility, result agility, and self-awareness. These factors can also be used to identify some types of teachers in terms of how they are inclined to learn and teach. Mental agility is more akin to street smart rather than book smart. Mental agile teachers are curious and they constantly explore new strategies and techniques to excel in their way of teaching. People agility consists of characteristics like communication and interpersonal skills. Such teachers have a high level of emotional intelligence and are capable of bringing out the best in their students, even in the face of setbacks. Teachers with change ability are experimental, and they do not hesitate to take unfamiliar paths to help their students move forward. Teachers with result agility can deliver consistently in new or challenging situations. They are often calm and composed. They do not give up and try to reach the pupil's goals even in unfamiliar situations. Teachers who achieve a high score in self-awareness know their strengths, weaknesses, and limitations. They take feedback to get better and excel at their job. Thereby, they are aware of the possibilities of improving. The theory says any teacher may have characteristics of several of these 5 factors. However, in each person, one of the 5 factors is most dominant. Translated into a personal style of teaching and learning, the 5 learning agility factors can be expressed in verbs which denote a type of action. These verbs are renew, connect, change, realize, and reflect. In more detail, teachers that renew help their pupils renew their skills. The second, teachers helping their students to connect their skills. The third one, teachers helping their students to change their skills. The fourth type are teachers helping their pupils to realize their skills. And the last type are teachers that helping their students to reflect on their skills. With a view to helping students successfully develop their own higher order thinking skills, it is therefore recommended that teachers be aware of their own specific learning agility profile. Knowing how you learn yourself also gives you insight into how you teach others. This self-insight can help to better connect with the individual student and can provide insight into why supporting one student succeeds better than another. In addition, by knowing each other's style and strengths as a teaching staff, you as an individual teacher can make targeted appeals to a colleague with different learning agility profiles in more difficult situations. And in doing so, each teacher contributes both individually and as a team to the well-being and self-esteem of their own students. How to proceed next now that we know that there is an association between the teacher's individual learning agility profile and the extent to which the student succeeds in developing his or her own higher order thinking skills. It may be recommended that a learning agility assessment be administered as a teaching corps. This can take the form of an online personality test which measures and reports the individual profile in a reliable and valid way. Then discuss each other's personal results as a team. This will provide insight into the learning agility profiles present within the teaching staff in your school, and this enhances mutual understanding. In doing so, the fields of talent management, organizational psychology, and education come together in a unique way. Continue to share this insight with each other regularly in intervision meetings. In this way, both students and teachers can continue to learn and develop in competency-based education, which focuses on learning and educating the higher order thinking skills that are so necessary in nowadays world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brouwer, for such an interesting approach in teaching. Teachers are the critical players behind education quality. High-performing education systems attract and retain best talent into the teaching force, provide tailored, focused, practical, and ongoing in-service, pre-service education, and empower teachers through increased autonomy and exciting career trajectories to lead the improvement in education quality in their classes, schools, communities, countries. Elaine Chaplin is a professor at the Graduate School of Education, Nazarbayev University, Kazakhstan, with diverse research interests with a quantitative paradigm. Her major research and teaching fields are teacher education and continuing teacher development, teacher professionalism and standards, research and professional ethics, educational leadership, higher education, teaching and learning, and especially rural schools. Many of these topics intersect with the issues of equity, diversity, and internationalization of education. Professor Chaplin is presenting today the topic, Understanding Conceptualization of Teaching as a Profession to Improve the Quality of Teaching and Learning. The floor is yours, Professor.
Доброе утро, Kalitan. Thank you so much for your invitation to speak today at this very prestigious event. I'm going to ask you a question. I wonder how you see yourself as a teacher or an educator. I've been working in education for over 40 years, and 30 of those in higher education. And yet I still define myself first and foremost as a teacher. But the collective identity of those who work as teachers and define themselves as teachers has been evolving over recent years. So I'd like to talk to you today by drawing on a range of recent and current research studies that I'm involved in, and to explore and compare international and local conceptualizations of teacher professionalism, including how educational research is perceived and used by teachers. I'll connect these ideas to some recent developments in pre-service teacher education and advocate for the importance of an ethical code for the profession. I discuss these issues because I believe the way we perceive ourselves influences how we conduct ourselves, and ultimately this impacts on the teaching and learning for our students. So, if we can just think a little bit historically for a moment. Prior to the 1990s, teachers were often viewed as master craftsmen and women. Lortie used the phrase an apprenticeship, mainly of observation, as how we learned the craft of becoming a teacher. We learned in practice from someone with extensive experience in the field. This required a lot of hands-on practice rather than sophisticated knowledge base. From the 1990s, teachers and academics have argued that while teaching certainly still requires many practical skills, it should also be considered a profession which has some additional attributes. So how do we define a profession? Well, think about well-established professions, think about medicine, think about law. So when we think about these professions, these are some of the defining attributes. It requires significant specialised knowledge, high levels of autonomous action, continuous updating of knowledge through career-long learning, provision of an important public service, and oversight by statutory authorities. If you think about that in medical terms, you don't want to be operated on by a doctor who has simply been watching somebody doing the job. You want someone who has specialised knowledge that they keep up to date with, and you want to know that their work is regulated. So, in many contexts, to ensure the required standards of ethical behaviour and practice are maintained, commensurate with community and professional expectations, professions are subject to registration mechanisms and codes of conduct. Now, in Kazakhstan, teachers have historically been in a paradoxical position. On one hand, teachers are highly respected. Taking on a teaching profession is often something which is perceived to have a strong intergenerational influence. It's a vocation, it's a calling. And yet, on the other hand, teachers have been poorly paid, and they've conducted their work on the basis of specific tasks in a top-down power structure which often focuses on compliance. If you think back again to the issue of doctors and medical care, do you want to be treated by a practitioner who can make the best possible decisions about you on your particular conditions? Or do you want them to be making decisions based on what somebody tells them is good for you? So significant reforms over the last 10 years have introduced changing expectations of teachers consistent with international trends. The modernisation of the curriculum required significant new curricular and pedagogical learning. Change expectations have been recognised in new teacher attestation systems through the law on the status of the teacher, which has seen an increase in teacher salary and a reduction of expectations for tasks not aligned with student learning. But these changes have not yet impacted on how teachers perceive themselves, how we think about ourselves as members of the profession. And I believe it's important to do this because it impacts on student learning. So, I'd like to talk a little bit about some research which was conducted by Gulnara Namasova. She's was a PhD student supervised by Daniel Turano and myself. And she did very interesting doctoral research where she looked at how novice teachers perceive themselves and whether they consider themselves to be professionals. Dr. Namasova's qualitative study involved interviews with teachers in their first 5 years. She worked from the conceptual framework of teacher professionalism as proposed by the OECD, which identified 3 important elements represented here: a knowledge base, responsibility, and autonomy. Now, what she found was very interesting. She certainly found that those attributes were considered to be relevant by the novice teachers, but the way novice teachers interpreted the concept was quite unique. Firstly, novice teachers did not consider themselves to be professionals. So we have teachers in their first 5 years in schools who don't think that they're in a professional role being professionals. They believe that they lack the experience necessary to consider themselves to be professionals. So this is really interesting in finding. In other contexts, length of time in the profession does not define professionalism. It's not linked to length of experience. Even pre-service teachers are expected to be and talked about as being professionals within their fields. They may lack experience, and it's certainly impossible for them to have the knowledge and skills of a more experienced colleague, but they are still expected to exercise guided, autonomous decision-making and to demonstrate professional knowledge of content and pedagogy. What was interesting was that teachers valued knowledge, and by that they valued content knowledge over other attributes. They took a transmissive approach where their role was simply to transmit the subject knowledge that they had to their students. And I think this is something which we want to challenge if we want to consider the concept of professionalism, where teachers are perceived more as facilitators of student-centred learning. So Namasova found that novice teachers believed they had very limited autonomy, that they were only able to make very limited decisions within the classroom context. They saw that the curriculum and the textbooks limited their ability to make decisions, and certainly beyond the classroom they believed they had no decision-making capacity. They were not autonomous in any way. The novice teachers were critical of their pre-service education, which they perceived emphasised theory over practice, that did not enable them to develop a full sense of their professional roles within the schools. And despite these narrow constructions of professionalism, the novice teachers carried a significant weight of responsibility even beyond the school. So they have responsibility, but without decision-making capacity. Of course, this study was limited to novice teachers within Astana, and the findings cannot be generalised to all teachers in all areas of Kazakhstan. Nevertheless, it provides some interesting insights that needs further investigations. But the ideas identified by Namasova are consistent with ideas that are emerging from two other projects that I'm involved with at the moment. One is the Strengthening Initial Teacher Education project, which is a World Bank modernisation project led by YUMC with NU as local partners. And in this project, there is an emphasis on tackling ideas of professionalism at the pre-service teacher level. So 30 new teacher education curricula have been developed and will be trialled next year. And the focus on the project has been on the introduction of a competency-based, student-centred education approach which integrates practice and theory, emphasising the importance of evidence-based practice and the incorporation of research within teacher practice. There's currently an embargo on any more discussion of this information until this project is completed next year. So I want to talk about a further issue, and one which I was really pleased that Colleen raised this morning, about this concept of teachers and research. So I'm also involved in a project with my co-PI, Laura Karabasova, and this project is looking at how research is conceptualised by three groups of stakeholders: by researchers themselves, by practitioners, and by policymakers. And the findings on the teachers and teacher practitioners are still in their early stage of analysis, but I'll just share a few quick observations. Certainly, practitioners see the importance of research, but they believe that this area is largely underdeveloped. And they see that there is a disconnect between policy and practice. They are critical of the lack of research-informed policy and believe that educational policy lacks an empirical basis. Further, they perceive that the dissemination of research findings was challenging, citing that many practitioners were unable to access research because of the academic language used and because the medium of that language, that is, the challenge between research which was available in English, Kazakh, and Russian. So despite these challenges, we know that many practitioners, especially at NIS schools, are wonderfully engaged in lesson study, action research, and they are using this knowledge to inform practice. But I wonder how we spread this notion of the importance of research to more practitioners within the field. One of the things that I thought was particularly interesting from early studies, early analysis of the findings, is that research is being seen as a strong democratising influence. So for administrators of schools, for teachers themselves, using research methodologies enables many more people to have a voice. By participating in surveys, interviews, and focus groups, teachers believe that they have an opportunity to influence decision-making and to ensure that all stakeholders are engaged. So this suggests that the idea of limited decision-making that Namasova found with her study of novice teachers may be beginning to be challenged. So while I see very many developments in education in Kazakhstan, the pace of reform in this country is astonishing, and I see so many impressive developments. But one of the things that I think is potentially missing is some systemic alignment in teaching and teacher education. That is, who has responsibility for ensuring that all aspects are aligned and that all practitioners are able to contribute to the continuing development of the profession? So my background is from Australia, you may have noticed from the accent. And in Australia, the peak body, which has the role of aligning all aspects of teaching and teacher education, is called the Australian Institute of Teacher and School Leadership. And I'd encourage you to look at their website because they have amazing resources for teachers, principals, teachers at every level, novice teachers, lead teachers, and so on. Now, AITSL has a role in developing national standards for teacher education and accrediting all providers of teacher education. So in their standards, there are 3 domains of teaching standards, and they are referred to as professional knowledge, professional practice, and professional engagement. The language of being a professional is embedded in the 7 standards and the 37 substandards or components of those standards. The 7th standard talks about engage professionally with colleagues, parents, the community. Teachers are required to meet professional ethical responsibilities and engage with professional teaching networks and the broader community. Now, graduates from initial teacher education must meet the graduate level of these standards before they can become registered as teachers. That is, they must demonstrate they are graduates and professionals. So using and engaging in research is a requirement for continuing professional learning. These standards expect teachers to be classroom professionals from day 1 in schools. Not after 5 years, not after 10 years, but the first day they walk into schools, they are considered to be autonomous professionals. And if teachers fail to meet the required standards, they can be deregistered. So this holding of people to high levels of professionalism is an important aspect. So I want to return to my first slide because I asked you how we perceive ourselves. And the reason I ask this is because it impacts on our own and others' behaviour. There's extensive body of research on expectancy theory and self-fulfilling prophecy. And to quote from a more recent study by Callan and Lin, teachers' expectations of their profession, their professional identity for students' behavioural education, and their instructional and subject knowledge had a significant direct effect on the devotion of efforts to their work. That is, teachers' perceptions of themselves impacts on students' learning. And so, if teachers do not perceive themselves as professionals, are they able to perform to the highest standards as professionals? So I believe that perceiving oneself to be a professional empowers teachers to act autonomously. It emphasises the need to work collectively for the improvement of student learning through research-informed practice. Professionals take responsibility for student learning by exercising autonomy to make decisions that will enhance student learning and see themselves as a community that extends beyond the confines of the classroom. So, as you perhaps look in the mirror, I hope you see a powerful professional able to influence eternity by impacting on the learners that you have in front of you today. That is, that you will facilitate learning for all students. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chaplin, and thank you for all the work you do in Nazarbayev University for our country teachers, universities, with the development of these 30 programs for preparing teachers or in other universities, and hope this project with World Bank, with UNESCO, where you are changing the programs of preparing teachers, will support our country, and really our teachers, they will perceive themselves as professionals, and it is the future. Thank you so much for your. And the next topic is inclusive education, bridging differences for equity. Despite the fact that all people are different, schools still want to see a certain homogeneity among students. However, homogeneity empowers pedagogy and is not beneficial for either teaching or learning. To promote inclusive education in schools, we need to view people's differences from positive perspectives, and then such differences will benefit everyone. If we can respect differences, we can fight inequity and social injustice. Professor of Special Education David Rodrigues has taught at Portuguese, Belgium, Brazil, and China universities. He has published 32 books and dozens of articles in special journals. In 2017, he received the International Award for Excellence in Leadership from the Council of Gifted Children USA. And in 2020, he was awarded the Gold Medal for Human Rights by the Parliament of Portugal. Today, Professor Rodrigues will present the topic, Inclusive Education, Face the Differences to Promote Equity. You're welcome, Professor. The floor is yours.
Kairli tan ustazdar. Good morning, educators. These days I was traveling in Astana by taxi, and each time someone told me, "Where are you from?" I said, "From Portugal." And everybody said, "Portugal? Cristiano Ronaldo." So now you know already two names of Portuguese people, David Rodrigues and Cristiano Ronaldo. I would like to thank NIS for inviting me here. It's really a great pleasure to be here. And let me tell you that I understood this invitation as NIS saying us that everybody is able to learn. Everybody is able to learn. Not only the gifted, not only the special children. Everybody is able to learn. Another thing that is very important for me to be here is that our Nobel Prize of Literature in Portugal, Saramago, wrote that if you don't leave the island, you cannot see the island. That means that it's very good to come here and to learn from you, to learn about Portugal with you. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you very much. So, first of all, let me talk you a little bit about where I come from. Portugal is a small country with 1,000 kilometers of Atlantic Ocean. But I'm not talking about tourism. I'm talking about inclusive education in Portugal. And first of all, let me tell you that we have a very interesting experience in inclusive education, because we have a legislation that makes all our schools inclusive. We don't have special schools in Portugal, we have inclusive schools all over the country. Second, 99% of disabled students are in mainstream schools. Only students that have serious health problems are in different schools. School is supported by 7,500 specialist teachers and other professionals. And we changed the special schools into resource centers, meaning that those technicians that work in special schools now they work in regular schools, supporting children with difficulties in regular schools. And in each school cluster, we have a multidisciplinary support team. But I would like to tell you that inclusion has a lot to do with difference. A lot to do with difference. And probably I would ask, why are we different? Let me look at you. There's no one person like another one. You are so different. Everybody's so different. And there are three reasons, basically, that make us so different from each other. The first one is genetics, no doubt. And it was very useful during the pandemic for our survival, our genetic differences. Second, our personal experience. In 1980, Connolly and Prechtel wrote a seminal book called Maturation and Development. And what they said, it was very easy. They said that our brain is shaped by our experience. It's like our brain is made of clay and the experience makes our brain different. That makes us different from each other because we have different experiences. And third, our social condition. Different is very good, but inequality is horrible. And when I say inequality, I will tell you that it's not the same to be born a man or to be born a woman. It's not the same to be born rich or to be born poor. It's not the same to be born black or white. And so these are social conditions that affect us. And these three variables, when they interact with each other, this is the result. We are so different from each other. But if we are so different, why sometimes we don't like difference? Because difference is the only characteristic that is common to humankind. Difference is the human characteristic that is common. Second, difference is a ramp, not steps. Sometimes we think that difference is steps. Sometimes we say, oh, this child is 5 years old, you know. It's very different from another child with 7 years old. It's like there was a step, oof, from 5 to 6, oof. And difference is not a step. Difference is a ramp, is a continuous variable for all of us. And third, we need to understand difference and not to eliminate the difference. Sometimes we say, oh, our students were very different in the beginning of the school year, but in the end, they were alike. That's not why we want to know, to understand difference. We want to understand difference, not to eliminate, but to promote difference between people. And if we are so different, why are we looking for homogeneity in education? Believe me, I'm a teacher for a lot of years, too many. And I don't understand why we look homogeneity in education. We look homogeneous schools, homogeneous classes, homogeneous this and that. And maybe homogeneity is useful for teaching. I would say for the bad teaching. Maybe. But we don't have any evidence that homogeneity is positive for learning. I repeat, we don't have any evidence that homogeneity is positive for learning. And homogeneity impoverishes teaching. That means that if everybody learns that way, why do I have to look for different ways? And it's a centripetal process. Means that homogeneity drives you close to the center. Means that I am the member of this group, of this homogeneous group, you know? You know? I'm a member of this group. Drives you in a centripetal process. And now I would like to talk to you a little bit about inclusion. Not about definitions of inclusion, there are thousands of definitions of inclusion, but to call your attention for 4 aspects. The first of all is that the Commission of Human Rights of United Nations said in 2019 that inclusion is a multiplier right. That means that if you assure inclusion, for sure other human rights will come together with inclusion. For instance, health, for instance, security, for so many other rights that come together with inclusion. Inclusion is a multiplier right. And it means, inclusion means all community approach, not one place. Let me tell you a story. One day I went to a school, and that school was promoting the week of inclusion. And I was there, I made a conference for the school, and in the end I said, I'm not leaving the school. She said, why? You are not leaving the school? No, because this is the week of inclusion. If I go, probably the inclusions finish. And so I have to stay in this school because I want inclusion to be a value of this school all the time. So school inclusion is not one place, is not one person. Oh, that teacher is of inclusion. That teacher, that one, that what? Valeria is from inclusion. It's not only in a week, only in one day. So inclusion offers different opportunities to different persons. And let me tell you, all teachers, and this is a way, a pathway that we follow in my country. That is, all teachers, all the schools are schools and teachers of inclusive education. Of course, they need someone to support them. They need someone to support them. But all you are teachers of inclusive education, because it would be very unfair if you could refuse education for those that most need it. And what is not inclusion? What is not inclusion? Sometimes we see some projects called inclusion, but in fact they are not inclusion. It's not to build a normal school in the special school, or a special school into a normal school. To have 2 schools. I have the normal school and the special school. And this is not inclusion, because again, you are looking for homogeneity. You are looking, these guys, they learn very well. And this, oh my God, this is the problem. And so immediately we make this difference that we build a normal school into a special school. Not to lower our expectative about some students. And let me tell you something that is very polemic, but I would love to discuss this with more time. We don't know, with all the research we have, that a certain kind of disability has to be taught in a certain way. We don't have any evidence of that. And so each time you say, oh, this is a project for Down syndrome. You said, really? and for the others. It's useful for the others. Yes, it is useful for the others. Oh, this is a project for gifted students. Is it can you use it for Down syndrome? You can. We don't have evidence that we have a single method for a single diagnostic. Inclusion was the title of the report of the Global Education Monitoring Report of UNESCO in 2020. And read the title, Inclusion and Education, all means all. I'd like now to talk to you about, very rapidly, about 3 aspects that I think are very important when you want to develop an inclusive school. First of all is the curriculum. Sometimes we look at curriculum as it was a holy thing. It came from somewhere, someone did it, and it's, that's the curriculum. And sometimes we give too much importance for this national and fixed curriculum. And the problems we have with this standardization and obesity, everybody is saying that our curriculum in school is obese. For instance, the Association of Teachers of Mathematics in my country said the program is impossible. So many things in the program. You need to run. You have to run, and it's impossible to finish the program. This is not a good idea to develop children, to educate children, in the way of running without knowing where you're going. So, obesity. And so, it's important to plan the curriculum for all. No one can be outsider. When I was training teachers, I said to my teachers, write in your table the sentence, who will be excluded in this class? When they are planning the class, they had on the table, who will be excluded from this class? And they said, there are 3 students that will not understand what I say. And what do you do about that? What do you do about that? Are you suggesting some alternative idea? Are you suggesting a new methodology? Are you suggesting a different organization of groups? What are you doing? Why are you so conformist and saying there are some students that don't understand me, I'm so important, that don't understand me, and sometimes you don't do enough to pick up those students that have so many difficulties in classroom. The third aspect, it's thank you. The second will be innovative ways of learning. We heard so much yesterday about that, and so many valuable contributions. And the problem is that when we use innovative ways, they are rare, and for some, sometimes I have a very good methodology, but it's only for the good students. One day I went to a school, and that school was organizing a study visit. And I said, for all the students, no, it's a prize. It's a prize for the good students. The good students have a study visit. And I said, who do you think needs more that study visit? And they said, probably all of them. So, if it's all of them, make the study visit for all of them. Because, in a way, you are sometimes giving innovative ways of learning only for some. The importance of motivation. We heard so much about motivation yesterday. Motivation, project-based learning, design thinking, active and expressive methodologies, and so on. Number 3, create inclusive environments. Sometimes we think inclusion is in the classroom. No, inclusion is in the school, inclusion is in the community. Inclusion is in all those places. It's not only one place, but it's an environment. Sometimes we have that inclusion responsibility of some, for some, sometimes, and in some places. And you have to think that we have human rights. It's very important, human rights. But don't forget we have human duties. Human duties. That is, we have the first human duty we have is to assure human rights for everybody. The first human duty we have. And so I'm finishing. Probably inclusion has to do with these 3 B's. To be, being actively implied in learning environment, not only being there, but being participant in the learning environment. To belong. Belong means I am part of this school. I am part of this group. Everybody's part of this group. And to become, to feel that is committed with objectives in the future. Recently, UNESCO published a very important report. If you could read, it's in Russian, the translation. Reimagining Our Futures Together, a new social contract for education. If you can read this, please do. It's an open window for the future. So we want education as a common good, that schools is a place of cooperation and shared values. And don't forget that everybody has something to learn and something to teach. All the students have things to teach. All the teachers have opportunities to learn. And this is a school where everybody teaches, where everybody learns. I'll tell you who this man is. This man is called Django Reinhardt. He was a gypsy, and he lived in a roulotte, in a small house. One day, his house took fire, was in fire, and he came back to the house to save his guitar. It was the thing he loved more. He was 13 years old. And he was damaged in 2 fingers of the left hand. If you see, he only plays with 2 fingers because 2 fingers are paralyzed after 13 years old. And Django Reinhardt became the greatest guitarist of jazz ever. Django Reinhardt. So don't forget, difference has a role. Everybody that is different means us. We have a place in the world, or to teach, or to play jazz. Rahmet.
Thank you, Professor Rodriguez. Thank you. Thank you so much for such an interesting approach to inclusive education. Really, the difference is a ramp, and really, future is in be, belong, and become. It is. We will for sure read the report and to see how it will work for all of us. And really, all the people are different, and we love and like each other because we are different. Thank you. And now we have. A representative of Japanese National Institute for Education, Policy and Research, and it has a history of more than 70 years since it started out in June 1949. Professor Tosha Chichibu, since 1998, is a senior researcher of a National Institute for Education Policy Research. Before that, he also worked as administrative officer at the Ministry of Education in Japan. Professor Chichibu is a member of a number of academical societies, such as World Association of Lesson Studies Asia Pacific Educational Research Association, American Educational Research Association, Japan Educational Administration Society. He is an author of 10 books and more than 20 articles in international journals. And Professor Toshio Chichibu is our great friend as he works with us with our Center of Excellence since 2012. And he made a lot for development of teachers' professionalism in Kazakhstan. And today he will present how Kazakhstani schools fostered professional capital through lesson study.
Hello everyone. Good morning, Kairton, Zdrovice. Perhaps many of you may see me second or third. Yes. I came to this country frequently. I have already visited many cities in this country and give information of lesson study. I like Kazakh foods, bishparmak, kazı, shashlik. Many people say I like Kazakh. I think, I expect, I might be a Kazakh. So, today, I give you my presentation, how you improve your school by lesson study using framework of professional capital. Why professional capital? So, in many cases, you focus on your pedagogical knowledge. For example, to attending the conference, you may get knowledge. Those kind of experience may focus on human capital, but to improve your teaching skills, it needs social capital. With colleagues, you cannot teach students independently. You have to teach students with your colleagues. So I focused on, I use the framework of Hargreaves Professional Capital. And the second reason to use the framework of professional capital, there exists some criticism in lesson study. In Japan, even in Japan, when young teachers open his or her lesson to colleagues, they give criticism to the teacher. If the objective of the lesson is to improve teaching competence of the teacher, criticism may be okay. But in many cases, criticism will destroy the communication between teachers. So in Japan, there exists another type of lesson study which focuses on social capital. In the lesson study which focuses on social capital, teachers focus on student learning, not pedagogy. In the post-lesson discussion, they shared what they observed how students learn in the lesson. Those kind of meeting, post-lesson meeting, will not defeat the communication between colleagues. But of course, some of teachers want to improve their own pedagogy. So even in Japan, there exist two types of lesson study in this diagram. In this country, you have two lesson study handbook. One is written by Peter Dudley, and another is written by me. Pete's handbook focuses on pedagogy. So his lesson study focuses on human capital. My handbook focuses on social capital. So which you should focus on? The answer is both. Both. Even you focus on human capital, you have to communicate with your colleague carefully. And when you focus on social capital, you have to develop your pedagogy. So the conclusion is more important thing is reflection. So I made this diagram to explain both social capital and human capital is important, and decisional capital as reflection is more important. It is. It follows the framework of professional capital. You have long history of lesson study, about 1 decade. In 2012, lesson study started in this country, and on the December of 2012, I came here with snow, much snow, visited Baitelek Tower. And the next year, I stayed this country 6 months and visited about 10 cities. So now, almost all of your school conduct lesson study. So I conducted a questionnaire research in 2020. COE stats helped me to send a questionnaire to all schools. So I could get many responses. About 9,000 teachers could reply to me. So those data could show how many schools conduct lesson study and how schools create professional capital. How many schools in this country conduct lesson study? Over 98%. Almost all schools conduct lesson study. Of course, not all teachers conduct lesson study. Only 20% of school conduct lesson study with all teachers. They concentrate on lesson study only. But in other case, teachers are divided in two groups. One group conduct lesson study, and the another group conduct action research. It's okay. But I asked them, how frequently you conduct lesson study meeting, and how many teachers join in lesson study. So I divided them into two groups. One group which conduct lesson study frequently, and the another not so frequently. I will explain you the difference between two groups. With a questionnaire like this, I could get 4 factors of professional capital. Factor 1 is collective reflection. It is decisional, one of decisional capital. Collective reflection means how to improve, discuss with colleagues, how to improve your lesson. And factor 4 is personal reflection. Personal reflection means improve by yourselves. Second factor is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy means human capital, your teaching competence. And the third factor is exchange, how you exchange your knowledge or material tools between colleagues. It means social capital. So with these questionnaire, I could identify 4 factors following professional capital framework. Those 4 factors correlate each other. Over 90%, they correlate each other. And I checked the difference between 2 groups. The percentage of teachers who participated in the lesson study was divided into 2 groups. More than half participated and less than half participated. In this diagram, over half group shows much professional capital. And same differentiation shows frequency. Once a month or more group, and several times a year or less group. Once a month or more group shows more professional capital. So, lesson study can be correlated to professional capital. So, my next question is, which affect at first? Correlation each other. But I want to make clear what kinds of capital lesson study can improve. So I conducted multiple regression analysis. The conclusion is percentage of teachers who join lesson study and frequency of lesson study meeting can affect collective reflection only. So, this is my conclusion. Of course, decisional capital and social capital and human capital affect each other. But lesson study affect collective reflection at first. And collective reflection will affect individual reflection or social capital or human capital. So the result of this study can be interpreted as revealing the situation of school culture in this country, which is changing through lesson study. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Toshiba. Today we had this session called Teachers' Professionalism for the Benefit of Every Child. And we had 4 different point of views from Dr. Arnold Brouwer, the Professor Elaine Chaplin, Professor Toshio Chichebu, and from David Rodriguez. I want to thank all of our keynote speakers for these. Let us say thank you to all of them. And бүгін құрметті әріптестер, бүгінгі сессиямыз
Distinguished participants, dear ladies and gentlemen, today we discussed a very important topic, the professionalism of teachers for the benefit of each and every child, and I thank you for your participation at the plenary session. Next, we work according to our agenda, and we will move on to the next session.